You can barely, yeah, really. What do you have in there? You can almost die. That's what I was wondering too.
Okay.
Unless this is your go next. We should all just go.
They call it a bug out.
I want to.
Yeah. You want to do it then? Okay. Yeah, Friday at noon. Next Friday, Assumption BBM. Litigation and personnel.
Call the county council meeting to order. Mr. Deach has the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Zembo, please call the roll.
Mr. Kuzic.
Present.
Mr. Dean. Here. Mrs. Ferraro. Here. Mr. Heckman.
Here.
Mr. Locke.
Here.
Mr. McGee is absent. Ms. Fargo Hefner is absent. Mr. Warner.
Here.
And Mr. Rinsky. Here. All present except Mr. McGee and Ms. Fargo Hefner, with Mr. Locke and Mrs. Ferraro on the phone.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'd like to take a motion to approve the minutes of October 3rd and October 9th.
Motion to approve by acclamation.
Kusick, Mr. Werner. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes. Courtesy of the floor, I have no one who signed up. Does somebody like to address council? Seeing no one. We're going to, before we get to the executive's report, going to call a executive session, and the topic is pending litigation, personnel issue, and the time is 6:32. Check.
No notes.
No notes? No nothing? Just your body, right? Just.
we have all the, transportation.
Yeah, we have a meeting.
They call it the transportation improvements up there.
Yeah, it's not to me.
And it's probably gonna be about, it was discussed last night at capital projects meeting. Right now, the feds are looking at it and they expect to have an answer by the end of the year. And that's when we'll start the design. Yes. It will happen, but it may not happen until for another 2 or 3 years, but it will happen. Yeah. It is a beautiful bridge. Yeah. Yeah. Stone Arch bridges are something. They last forever. I mean, that thing has been around now. You know, probably it's still been around, or not for the, development.
I don't know what to do.
There's development they built nearby. I mean, yeah, I think it is. And there was a lot of truck traffic to and from the site, and I think that did the bridge in. Yeah. That did the bridge in. And, you know,
Sorry about that. That was what you're.
was a fan, yeah. It was a parent.
Steelers varsity coach was arrested by another Steelers parent who was a state cop because of the way he acted. Put that in your head. It's suburban youth football.
This happened this season?
Varsity head coach was arrested with his agent
Who's the
by
varsity head coach?
Holy shit. But by a state cop
Whose child plays for
whose
him?
child plays for the Steelers. Yeah.
Now, is that because he's not playing his kid as much
No,
as he
no,
thinks?
this is like a legit, no, because I guess the state cop changed on the shirt.
Or he's on a different team?
He's having to do it inside control.
What?
That whole thing is so weird.
And they, yeah, so they arrested.
Oh, God, like that. Should be.
Part of the reason that Lyle got betrayed all really bad years ago. They bought him out of retirement. And he was in the township. He was like, he was the one guy who was at Greg House. He said they were crazy. No, not the Bulldog. That's
She is. I've never met such a guy.
Oh, well, it's like,
Well, my grandson.
We tried.
I mean,
It would have been truly just a bonus.
the one coach, he's a jerk. Now, both of all his kids are. One went to Penn. Played football.
So this past weekend I was dropping humanitarian supplies off at the Bahamas.
Oh, God.
This is the baggage compartment with
Oh, wow.
stuff the airplane.
Who stuffed the airplane?
Me and the other pilot, and then there's an organization down in Miami, outside of.
Oh, okay. So you delivered all that from Miami to Bahamas.
Yeah. So on our second trip out there, so that was Sunday. We did 2, or Saturday we did 2. Then we had clothing supplies we're sending out. And
Call the meeting back to order.
shattered my windshield.
Adjourned at 6:32. It is now exactly
Jesus Christ.
6:51. And it was about
No good deed.
pending litigation and also personnel issues. All right, so now we're back on course, and it's to the county executive. He has a report.
Very briefly, I'm pleased to report that Mr. Dertinger and Mr. Sorrell were able to obtain our permits from Upper Nazareth Township to begin construction, and construction has begun on the Forensic Center. We're very pleased about that. Mr. Dertinger specifically, Mr. Sorrell as well, have been doing an excellent job in making this project go as fast as a government project can possibly go. So that's great news, and I wanted to let you know about that, and I wanted to specifically single out Mr. Dertinger for his excellent work in this regard. You have a copy, I believe, of my October 15th letter to Becky Bradley, Executive Director of the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. You have, Council, you have won a tremendous victory in the fight against warehouse proliferation. If you refer to my second paragraph in that letter, in the first draft of the comprehensive plan, they had 500,000 square feet as the square footage that would signal a review of a warehouse or other logistics facility. In our comments, in the county's generated comments, we had suggested 100,000. There was ultimately a compromise of 250,000 square feet, but that will generate a review of warehouses and logistics. You won a very serious and important victory in that regard. But I think, and credit goes to Vice Chairman Greg Zabrowski, who I believe was once a member of this august body, and he won in the plan a different trigger, a review for smaller warehouse developments, including proposed uses more than 1/4 mile from major roadways or located outside of designated development areas. This was a huge and major change in the comprehensive plan, and he did a great job, and you've done a great job in your support of us, allowing us to take a hard line on these plans. Now, the rest of the letter covers some of the problems that weren't addressed or weren't adequately addressed vis-a-vis our comments to the draft plan. And you'll have to decide when you get the final draft of the plan whether you think the notes are adequate. Now, as recently as this afternoon, I was at the executive board meeting of the Planning Commission, which, as you know, I'm a member of, and Ms. Bradley clearly said that they were going to be incorporating our notes and rewriting the final draft in consideration of my October 15th, 2019 letter. So I'm hoping they further come toward you, because what you're trying to do, Council, is for the first time change the mindset of planning in the Lehigh Valley from being development first to being preservation first, and was specifically with an emphasis on farmland preservation. That would be a huge difference, and I hope as this process goes forward, they see the wisdom of what we're trying to do here in Northampton County and follow our lead, and hopefully you'll be able to approve the plan. Yes, sir.
Can I ask a question on this
Sure.
topic? Based on the compromise, I'm guessing it wasn't unanimous with the entire Planning Commission membership or board, that they wanted to do 500 square foot.
Yeah, we wanted to drop it to 100,000.
What was the main objection to dropping, to that actual dropping?
I suspect there were, I wasn't present.
Oh,
I suspect there were other voices who felt that that was too far.
But I
I
was
think
curious.
Mr. Dabrowski won some serious concessions.
Yeah.
For the first time, there's actual criteria in the comprehensive plan for warehousing. I mean, that is a huge deal. And in your fight against warehouse proliferation, you've scored a big victory.
Thank you.
And that, unless you have any other questions for me, that's all I have.
Are there any questions for the county executive regarding his report? Something specific? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, next we'll go to old business. And the first item on old business is the public hearing on the ordinance entitled an ordinance of the County Council of the County of Northampton, Northampton County, Pennsylvania, authorizing the incurring of non-electoral debt by the issuance of general obligation bonds in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $75 million, covenanting to pay and pledging all available taxing power of the local government unit for the payment of the bonds, authorizing the establishment of a sinking fund and the appointment of a sinking fund depository, fixing the form, maximum interest rates, maturity rates, and other provisions for the payment thereof, authorizing the acceptance of a proposal for the purchase of the bonds, authorizing a filing of required documents with the Department of Community and Economic Development, ratifying and directing certain actions of officers, and making certain other covenants and provisions in respect of the bonds. This ordinance was introduced by Ms. Vargo Hefner and Mr. McGee at the October 3rd, 2019 meeting. Now, I'm going to start by saying I'm going to ask for any questions or comments. There will be amendments that are going to be made, and I'm going to take the liberty then, after the amendments are made, to also allow for any public comment. And I just think it's a matter of fairness. So are there any questions or comments from the public regarding this ordinance as it sits? I mean, mainly it's going to stay in place. But seeing none, are there any amendments to this ordinance? I'm going to make a motion to amend the ordinance. And is there, I'm going to read them. Yeah, I'm just looking for them. Here they are right in front of me. All right, there's 4 parts, but it's going to be one motion. First part, not to exceed, the not to exceed amount of $75 million was added on the cover page, page 5 and page 10. The not to exceed schedules were received from PFM last night at 8 p.m. and have to be attached to the ordinance as Exhibit A. Secondly, the identity of the purchaser, Janie Montgomery Scott, was added on page 8. The purchaser was selected by the county on October 9th. Thirdly, the address of the paying agent sinking fund depository, U.S. Bank, was changed on pages 8 and 22 from the paying agent's Pittsburgh office to its Philadelphia office. And fourthly, the interest payment dates and record date were added to the form of bonds on page 22 and 23 based upon the not-to-exceed schedule received from PFM last night. Now, is there a second to my motion?
I'll second that.
Ms. Zirinsky. Before we have any discussion, would anyone from the public like to respond to any of these changes? Seeing no one, a discussion on the amendments.
Sure. Okay, so yesterday during the
Cruz.
Finance Committee meeting, one of the, I gave this analogy to somebody's mortgage, and, this was initially about $110 or $111 million mortgage. We've paid it down to the point where it's around 62, somewhere in that range. And what is being proposed before us is a not-to-exceed amount of $75 million. Now, during the Finance Committee, you had PFM had indicated to us that this was to give them flexibility. Well, that's about $10 million or more of flexibility. Could you explain to us, if I'm a homeowner and I'm refinancing, if I want to put more money into my house, I might want to do that. But can you just tell us and the public why we need to have this $75 million rather than the amount we owe, which is 62, something like that?
Thank you, Ms. Christie. And Ms. Barron, feel free to, since there's going to be some questions, feel free to bring in whoever you need to bring
I'm
in.
going to introduce Scott Shear from PFM. He was here when this was introduced. His associate Garrett was here yesterday, so he's here today, along with our bond counsel, Anthony Ditka, to answer any of your questions. So I'm going to have them come up and go through that with you.
Okay.
Good evening. So, great question. So as far as the numbers go, so you're right. Right now, the outstanding par amount is, or the outstanding balance of the bond issue is about 61 million.
61.
Give or take a little bit. The actual size of the issue that we expect is about 68 million. And the reason for the difference is, remember, we have to issue the new debt today, the new refunding debt, and put that money aside in an escrow until the call date of the old bonds. And the call date on the old bonds is in 2022. So we got to make sure there's sufficient money to pay the interest component of the current bonds during that time period. So again, what we expect the actual transaction to be is somewhere around $68 million. The reason for the parameters, and again, this is not specific to Northampton County. This is in general, I'd say probably between the different clients that Dinsmore represents and PFM. I'd say probably 95% of our clients, whether it's counties or school districts or cities, whatever the case may be, do these parameters resolutions. Typically, the delta, if you will, the difference between the parameters amount and the actual issuance is usually right around 20%. So on a $10 million bond issue, $10 million financing, that would be $2 million. For this one, $60 million, we're talking more like 12 million plus for that 20%. We slimmed it down a little bit to the 75 million. Again, the whole reason for that is we all know you're not going to be issuing 75 million, and we all know that the only permitted purpose of this refinancing as built into the ordinance that your bond counsel will review is only for the refunding components. There's no new money at all. And so basically after, assuming this gets approved this evening, then your bond counsel will be filing all the paperwork to the state. That's going to show this maximum parameters amount. Shortly after closing, Anthony's going to supply additional documentation to basically just say parameters for 75 million, we only use 67 million in that case, eliminate that balance from there. And so the point of it is for all the paperwork to go through the state to get approved so we don't have to come back for any additional votes. This all started, I would say, the whole parameters concept kind of really became more popular after the market crash. And in 08 and 09 is when a lot of our clients started to switch to these kind of parameters, ordinances, and resolutions. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, if I may. Evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Ditka. I'm your bond counsel. Last time I was here is November 1st of last year. We voted on a similar ordinance. Part of the reason for the structuring also, as Scott mentioned, when I do the filing, you will have the not to exceed amount and the schedules attached. This schedule is in the ordinance that you're looking at. And you can see that the bonds are sold in serial maturity. So every maturity has a number next to it, its principal amount. When the bonds are sold, if the bonds are sold and they're still under that $75 million figure, but one of these individual years is exceeded, we have to start over. So we build that box exceedingly big to make sure that there's cushion in each of these numbers. The protection for the county that we're not going to overborrow is in section 11.1 of the same ordinance that says that we can only move forward if we have a purchase proposal that meets a savings target of 3%. And we can't meet your savings target if we overissue. So it's a very good question, and this is a question I get from local governments all across the Commonwealth every time we do one of these. But the answer is, it is not intended to allow you to borrow more than you need. It is intended to give the structuring the flexibility to fit within the box. That's really the reason. And again, the reason we do this instead of having the bonds prepared today, instead of having the bonds sold this morning and showing up, is it allows PFM to get to the market at the best possible time. If we had to line up the sale with the meeting, which we always did until 2006, 7, 8, you were very much at the market's mercy that day. Now we have a little more flexibility.
Okay, just to follow up then, potentially though, you could still borrow $75 million when in fact, we only owe 61.
We wouldn't be able to do that,
You
though.
couldn't save 3%.
Okay.
You couldn't save 3% of your total debt service savings.
All right, are you referring to Article 11 of the ordinance? Okay, so I'm looking at what I have here, and it's,
What page are you on?
it's page 44, section 11.01. Down at in the 1101 towards the bottom, it's subsection I, it says produce net present value debt service savings of, and then it's blank. Why is that blank?
It's 3%. I think that was determined.
But in what we have, it's blank. So I'm hesitant to vote for
But
this.
Can we have Mr. Barron come up? I mean, I mean, we're sort of low tonight with council
Yeah,
members
blank.
for good reasons, and the question's going to be a concern, I think, so what's the deal?
The ordinance should have had 3%.
It doesn't.
Okay.
So are you opposed to a council amendment to, I mean,
Not at all.
oh, all right, I just,
And the prior recommendation, from PFM was to set that limit at 3%.
all right, thank you. Now I'd like to ask bond counsel, just to follow up. Are you comfortable with setting this at 3%?
Certainly.
Oh, all right. So do you want to make,
If I may, the answer to your question is, the first reading of this was on October 3rd. And I was selected as your bond counsel just a few days prior. So
Take care of that.
we put the ordinance out before the investment banker had been selected and things to make sure we had it available for your first reading. And some of this information wasn't known at the time. And it's become known since. That's the answer to your question.
okay, now, just a point I want to make, a point of order. On the potential amendment, that the line that says net present value debt service savings of, there's a dollar sign. So obviously that would have to change.
1.83.
And it would be a percent of signs. So, no, but I mean, I want everything to go smooth up here, so when the time comes to vote on the actual ordinance, we're all on the same page.
Can I comment on, sorry?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Dietrich.
So I just want to be clear, so we roughly owe 61 million right now. We would not go forward with this unless there was a greater than 3%. So the most the county would be out of on dealing with these would be 59,170,000.
Say that last part one more time.
So if it's 61 million is what we owe, we would not go forward with it unless there was a 3% savings, which is 1.83 million. So the county would only be paying 59.17 million.
No, the actual new part, that actual new issuance amount is gonna be roughly 67 million. Again, the reason is, if you go to, well, actually, yeah, I have some extra handout, maybe just go through some math, and might help.
Yeah, because we don't have that page that you were referring to, and at least I don't.
I don't either.
He doesn't have that either. You referred to a page.
These numbers look very similar to what I was.
Let's see, let's see. Thank you.
Yeah, we had that page. I don't have the numbers. He said that
He had like a chart of some sort that you had referred to. But before,
Yeah,
You
before
had
that,
shown the chart
you showed a chart that we don't have.
breakdown.
Oh, that's, no, the chart is the schedule that would also be on the, in the amendment that was read earlier, it was to add not to exceed debt service schedule. That's the one.
that page, yeah, we don't have that.
That was not what, did we receive that? Excuse me, did we receive
No, I
that?
just gave you mine. Well, I have the same
He
copy.
said there was a chart that was on these.
Is it right here? Is this it? But this is what you just handed
This
us
is
right
what I
now.
just
All right,
Yes,
so now you
okay.
have
But
it.
it's not in this packet that we received prior. Just letting you know.
All right, so we all agree we have it now.
We got it now.
All right, great, go right ahead, sir.
Let's,
All right, so what page are you on now?
let's
Sorry.
get reactivated. So on the handout that I just.
Yes.
Let's go to first to page 4.
Very
We're
good.
gonna get our bearings a little bit.
The hand is.
So on page 4 is all the outstanding indebtedness of the county. And you see in column 4 where we have highlighted in yellow and the red dotted line around the Series B of 2012 bonds.
Right.
So that's the principal and interest that's due on an annual basis for the bonds that we're looking to refinance. So there you see in column 4 what the annual principal and interest is. Down at the bottom, where it says total, the total principal and interest is about 83.7 million. And right below there where it says principal, 60, but call it 60.8 million. That's the principal outstanding as of right now.
61, yeah.
Yep, so that's your debt portfolio in totality and how this particular issue fits within that. So now let's turn to the next page. So the next page is, on page 5, the actual breakout of the 2012 Bs. It now looks at it more on a semi-annual basis. So in column 2 is the total principal amounts. And as Anthony mentioned, there's serial maturities in each year out through 2030. So again, in column 2, you can see the principal amounts maturing. Column 3, you can see the interest rates, and then the debt service related to that. Okay, so that's sort of the breakout of the principal and interest because it's actually paid every 6 months. So you make semi-annual payments on that. So now, this is an important page, page 6. It starts getting the weeds a little bit, but as I mentioned, the bonds that we're funding have a call date in 2022. So we're going to issue these new bonds now if you approve it. Transaction's going to close. We're basically going to put 98% of the proceeds in this escrow account. And that's what page 6 looks like. So we're going to invest that money. So we're going to actually go out and bid out securities, buy securities, the highest yielding security possible, government entities like treasuries and agencies, things like that. We're going to bid that out and basically.
So for a 2-year security, essentially.
We're going to do multiple. It might be like a 1-year security and a 2-year.
But not to exceed that then because.
Correct,
yeah,
exactly. So in column 2 on page 5, these are the requirements of the escrow that we need to make sure there's sufficient money. So we need to make sure in column 2 that there's going to be money in this escrow available to pay these principal payments. Then you see that bigger payment on 10/1/22 of 54 million. That's basically the call date when you're paying all the bonds after the call date. And column 3 is the interest that we need to make sure that there's money in escrow to pay that interest to the bondholders. Because the bondholders or the investors, they're still going to want their investment. They're going to want their return even while money's in the escrow. So that's got to be here. So then in column 6, that is the hypothetical amount of the security that we're going to buy to fund this escrow. It's going to earn interest based off coupons, interest rates in column 7 that we're estimating right at the moment. So we're gonna earn about $2.4 million in column 8 from those securities. So it's gonna be producing roughly about 69.1 million of cash flow. Well, if you look at that total in column 9, that pretty much matches the total in column 5, which is the requirements that we need to make sure are substantial. So the reason for the bigger, and so follow me through the logic, and then we'll come back to this page. So that's sort of the math behind the way that escrow works. So to fund that escrow, taking into account the money we need to put in that escrow, taking into account the amount of interest earnings that are gonna be generated in that escrow, the new bond issue on page 7 is really gonna look closer to the $67 million number that I mentioned in column 2. And again, that's because we actually have to not only pay off the interest,
The balance.
pay off the principal amount, but we also have to make sure there's enough funded in there to pay the interest amounts as well. So now it kind of sounds weird where we're taking 60 million, we're refunding 60 million with 67 million, and we're still able to achieve savings. That's all because of the lower interest rate. So we're basically going from a 5% interest rate down to, say, somewhere between 2 and 2.5%. And it's that lower interest rate, that's what's producing all those savings that's generating 3% or more. And right now, you're showing there in column 8, about 3.3 million of net savings, or about 5.42%. So that's getting into the weeds a little bit, but I want to make sure everyone's clear that we have to fund the escrow to make sure there's sufficient monies in there to pay off the old bond. So the new issue is really going to be about 67 million of part of the principal amount, but the interest expense is much, much less than the old bond.
Can I ask a question?
Go right ahead.
The current rate is 5.
The current rate on those old bonds, if you go back to page 5,
5.
in column 3, it's about 5%.
Right. The new rate will be.
The new rate's going to be, we're
To
estimating at
3.
the moment like 2.3, somewhere in that.
So I'm just trying to get this straight. We're going to refinance the $61 million of debt at 67 because we have to pay the interest. We have to have that in escrow. We would have paid that anyway over the course of a year.
Over the course of a couple of years.
Over 2 years.
2022, yeah.
Over 2 years. But it still seems to me that we have 61 million, we're financing 67 million to save 3 million. So we're financing more to get less. I mean, even though the savings is 3 million, it's not 6 million that we're putting in.
Yep, so here's another way, I see what
So
you're-
just,
let's maybe go through a different.
yeah, I need to wrap my head
Yeah,
around
no,
that.
absolutely, absolutely. So let's go back to page 5.
Okay.
So a couple numbers just to sort of circle. So number 1 is the total in column 2, so that's 60.7 million. So that's the total principal amount that's outstanding. And then circle the total interest expense right now, that if you did nothing and you continue just to pay the debt service on the 12B bond, you'd be paying 20 million of interest
Okay.
expense over that life, okay? So you got those two, and then they total in column 5 to 80 million. So just kind of keep those 3 numbers in your head. So now, go back to page 7. So on page 7,
Okay.
the new, look in column 2.
I see it. I got it.
You good?
Yeah. It went from 80 to 77. That's where the 3 million is coming from.
You good?
I understand that.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
You have another question? Don't hesitate to ask. Sometimes it's a little tricky. I mean, it's,
No, it does, because it seemingly seems, it just seems like you're leveraging more money to get a $3 million savings, but the money that, I understand it
a
now.
lot of interest.
There's a lot of interest. It's pretty,
Okay?
It's a big bond.
All right.
it's a big bond.
Mr. Werner, I think you had your hand up.
Yes.
No.
Okay, let's go back. I have a simple question, okay? We went from 62 to 67 million. Now, with 67 million we're looking at. You're saying 75 million is added on, and you just said that the schedule, if the bonds are under 75 million, you must start over for additional costs, okay? Is that correct?
If the bonds, when sold, go outside the parameters of the approval that you're considering, we have to start over. The approval can't authorize a bond issue that's bigger in any way, whether in total amount or any of those maturities, and still be valid. Your officers would lose the ability to sign.
Those additional costs, are those set? Do you have an idea of where you're?
They're not necessarily, they're not costs.
Okay.
The schedule is fictitious in that it's built bigger than what we need to make sure that when the bonds are sold, they fit inside.
That's that $75 million number. Okay, here's my question then, okay? Because I'm trying to clear my head of these things. How do you come up with a $7 or $8 million cushion when it's really 67 million? It comes, let's say 70 million. Why do you need an extra 5 million?
Again, it's sort of the standard rule that I think most financial advisors and investment bankers use is about 20% cushion. So whether it's a $10 million deal, a $100 million deal, typically the difference between what we actually intend to issue versus the parameters is somewhere in that 20% ballpark. And here's kind of another example just to expand on what Anthony was saying. The schedule that he was showing before, if you go, stick with my handout.
Okay.
And you go to page 13. So that's the max schedule, the max parameter schedule that should be in the ordinance that's going to be filed with the state.
Okay.
And so not only is the total amount this inflated number of 75 million, when we all think it should be around 67 million, but obviously then each one of those individual maturities in column 2 are inflated a little bit too to get us, so it's maybe like $1 million in each one of those maturities. So what Anthony was saying before is, well, number one, we never know how the bonds are going to price. If they're going to price for premium, as a par, or the discount, and that's really starting to get in the weeds. But we leave that to kind of game day when we're actually pricing the bond, what's ultimately going to be the most efficient and provide the best benefit for the county. And that affects the structuring, how much principal we're amortizing in each year. So what we've learned over the years, we do a lot of bond issues, and as we said, this sort of became more vogue in 06 and 07, where initially clients had the same concern, well, why are we having an ordinance or resolution so much higher? Well, we tried to, I'd say maybe get a little bit too smart and cut the parameters too tight. Too close. And so what would happen then, so a good example would be, okay, in this particular case for the county, say the total bond issue that we're going to do turns out to be 68 million. So that's great. You think, okay, well, we're below the 75 million. We're all free and clear. Well, no, not really. As Anthony said, we got to look at each maturity. So maybe in one specific maturity, let's just pick 2021. Maybe there was investor demand for some special kind of bond that had premium bonds or something, and that 1 year, it needed to be 6.4 million. All the rest were well below each one, but just that one maturity, it had to be above there. We would have to stop the process. No officer would be able to sign the documents, and we'd have to re-advertise, go through the 2 readings again, start all over. And so that's when we cut it too tight. So basically, the whole entire industry said, for these kind of parameters, there's nothing devious going on or anything. We just need to make sure that we get things approved by the state and we can structure our transactions that meet the needs of our client. And so that's where kind of this 20% rule came into place to not have that exact situation happen, because the market's so fluid and rates are changing so much. What had happened back then was, then we'd have to go back to the board, wait another month, and in a lot of cases, we'd lose the deal because the market went up and gone. So that's it's basically to kind of protect the county.
I follow what you're saying, but in essence, what you're saying is your hypotheticals are what driving this extra $6 to $7 million that you need.
The
Hypotheticals.
Yeah, again, we fully expect the deal to be around 67, 68 million, like we're showing here.
Okay, so let's go back to my first question. Is there a potential for us exceeding 75 million?
No.
No. And yet you're saying that we need the 75 million because there has to be a cushion from the hypotheticals you've put on a 10-year calendar.
Yeah, again, we don't want to get to the point where we're pricing the bond, say, next week, and we're structuring the deal, because we need to make sure we're structuring this that we're complying with state law. We need to make sure we're complying with federal law, and most importantly, in this transaction, state law. And the state has a lot of provisions on how the county's overall debt can legally be structured. And there's a lot of parameters within there. Mm-hmm. And so if we're executing the deal, pricing the deal next Wednesday, and like I said, the principal for that one maturity comes in higher than the max schedule, we can't do it. Even though it may supply the best overall transaction for the county, we can't go forward with it. We have to scrap it. Even if all the other maturities are below these max numbers, we still, if the interest rate is 1 basis point above what we have in here, or we're $1 above any one of these maturities, we have to start all over.
And when you start over, we incur cost.
You incur costs, but it's more so the market risk.
It's the market risk versus cost.
Yeah. because we'd have to basically another month, to go through the 2 readings and get the advertisement in place and everything else.
And we would start, okay, all right.
So it just gives you the latitude to get the best deal.
You still have.
No,
Got
fine,
it.
thank you.
It sounds like, I mean, I know from past experience, we've locked, we've said there's we've set a percentile we're writing in. Also, what he's describing, I mean, it sounds like what we've had before. We could quibble over the amount and someone call it cushion or whatever you want to call it. But I mean, it doesn't seem like it's out of the ordinary based on the fact that we're not working in an environment that necessarily is, we can lock in certain things for ourselves, but they're working in a fluid environment. And so, I'm sorry, I'm Mr. Dietz.
No, just, and again, I realize that in the grand scheme, it's a small number, but the 61 million, and actually the 20% of that is actually 73, not 75 million with it. So, I mean, there's 2 million extra there on top of the 20%. And then the other question I had, so obviously, so we take this out in a perfect world, we get this done. So like you said, we're still paying on the original bonds till their mature date or call date of 2022.
Well, I would just clarify a little bit.
That's right.
Not just so the county's still paying that, but the money that's in that escrow is paying for that. The county would now be paying for
So-
the new 2019 bonds.
Okay, so we would not be making, that was my question. So we will not be making 2 payments over those 2 years. We will not be paying on, okay.
You're only gonna be paying on the new bonds.
Okay.
That money that's set aside in that escrow is gonna be paying the debt service on the old bonds until the call date of 2020.
Okay.
So technically, legally, those old bonds, the 2012 bonds, will be off your books. Because there's gonna be securities purchased that deem those to be defeased, so the county, you're off the hook.
Okay. Okay. And then, I'm sorry. And then the one other question I had, so that 3% cost savings that we had built in there, is that just on the interest in this, or does that include your guys' costs and everything rolled into it, the whole package?
That's the net after, that's after.
So it's everything rolled into it. Your guys' costs, everything all rolled in will be a minimum of 3%.
After all the costs are paid, the county still has to net 3% or more.
Oh, go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Cruz.
couple of, I think the big hang-up I'm having is with the maximum parameters, and you're telling us that, well, it's probably not going to be that way, and I think the one that we'll get into is the maximum parameter schedule. Your max rate is 5.5%. Now, I guess my question is, the current bonds are 5%. Why would you put a max rate of 5.5%? That makes no sense to me.
So it's not so applicable in this transaction because it's taxable, but there are, what I mentioned before about the premium bond. So there are different ways to sell bonds. You can sell them at a premium, you can sell them at a discount. And the way kind of the premium works is that if you buy a $10,000 bond, you actually pay $13,000 for it. And so you're actually paying more for it, but you're receiving a higher coupon payment, higher interest payment every 6 months.
It's a load, is what it's called.
So the yield you're going to get still say 2%, but at the end of the day, when that bond matures, you're going to get face value of what you bought, but you've been earning a lot of interest over that time. So a lot of investors, they want 5% coupons. Now that 5% coupon, like I said, the way it all kind of works, still yields say actually 2%, which is a big benefit to the county. And so that's why we usually have the max rate at 5 or 5.5%, because again, there is investor demand for these premium bonds, and well, sometimes they may need 5%, sometimes they only want 4%, but sometimes they use 5. So again, this is not actually Northampton County specific. This is the max rate that we basically put in almost all of our parameters, ordinances, or resolutions.
Okay. And then the other one has to do with the coupons of the new bonds. My question is for the next year you start off at 1.972%, and then it gradually increases over. This is on page 7.
Yep.
It gradually increases up to, what is that, 2.63. I guess my question is, why isn't that level, and why does it increase? Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, it's more. It's actually fairly flat right now because of the shape of the yield curve. The shape of the yield curve right now, when you look at say the 1-year rate versus the 30-year rate, it's more or less flat. Sometimes it's even inverted. which is a little odd, where a short-term rate is actually higher than the long-term rate. The normal shape of yield curve, if you will, is much kind of more sloping, where maybe the 1-year security might be 1% and the long-term might be 4 or 5%. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you kind of see that curve. Right now, we are more flat, and like you said, there are certain days where we might even be inverted a little bit. So we're actually locking in column 3. There's going to be investors that these are traditional fixed rate bonds. But they're going to be different for each year. And to have them slightly ascending, that's basically just a result of what the yield curve looks like today.
So when you bid it out, you're not bidding it out as a fixed rate bond then. You're bidding it out as, this schedule where each year the person who buys them is going to get a higher coupon over the 10 years.
Fixed rate bond. Each maturity has a fixed rate. Yeah. So there's no variable rate component to this. Once we, say we go to market next week, we lock in the rates, we close then a month later, the rates, the debt service, nothing is changing for the life of this transaction. There's no risk, there's no rate resets, there's no nothing, unless the county would want to refinance this 8 years from now. We have an 8-year call on it. Who knows, rates could be lower then, I'm never gonna say never. That's why we put the 8-year call feature on it, to give you that flexibility. So no, this is definitely.
But over the 10 years, the investor will see their interest rate increase from 1.97 to 2.63%. So
It depends which bonds they buy.
It's actually, they're all separate bonds. Someone's buying the 1 year, someone's buying the 2 year.
Right, it looks like one issue from your perspective, but each of these maturities may be bought by a different investor. And so the longer out you go, the longer they're lending you the money, the more return they want. It's no different than if you were gonna get a 5-year car loan and you had a rate of X versus a 3-year car loan, which would be lower. It's the same principle. They're lending you the money for longer, they're looking for more return.
Do you have any other questions?
that was it for now.
Well, we're going to vote on the amendments that were made, and
Which
I
you
still
did.
need a second. Ms. Zirinsky had
It was
seconded.
seconded.
Ms. Zirinsky had seconded it.
Actually,
Well, we're going to do that second. All right, so we're just voting on those 4 parts that
guess what?
Are you voting for the 3?
That would be.
I'm not putting the 3%, that's going to be a separate vote, separate
Okay, all right.
amendment.
I'll say
All
my
right,
thing then. I'll
so-
say mine.
All right, so let's do the ones that we did and we seconded. Are there any questions, any more questions on that? All right, please call for the vote.
Mr. Heckman?
Yes.
Mrs. Ferraro?
Yes.
Mr. Lott?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Ms. Zirinsky?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
And Mr. Dietz.
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. Now, does someone I'm going to make a motion?
But, I was going to ask them a question first before I did, if that's all right.
Ask a question, be a little clearer. Go ahead.
So just going off your math, that the 61 million and the 20% comes to 73, would you guys be happy with a max of 73 instead of 75?
Well, the only problem with that, we'd have to change each one of these maturity schedules,
Okay.
each one of these maturity amounts as well.
Okay.
So you can't amend that on the fly.
It's a little, we can get a calculator out and start doing it.
Maybe a little math, right?
All right, well, we passed an amendment for the on the original ordinance. Are there any other discussions or questions regarding the amendments on the original ordinance?
You gotta do the 3%.
Well, somebody has to make that motion.
Can I
I'll
make
you
a
wanna
make
do
motion?
it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'll make the motion that it
Ms.
goes.
Zirinsky, your motion is you want to,
I would like page, or 11.1,
page
page
44.
44, Article 11, Section 11.01I, produce net present value debt service savings. I would like that line changed, omit the $sign and put 3%.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Warner. A discussion. Seeing none, call for a vote.
Ms. Zirinsky?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mr. Dietz.
Yes.
Mrs. Ferraro?
Yes.
Mr. Heckman?
Yes,
Mr. Lott?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 7-0.
thank you. All right, now we are moving on to the ordinance as amended. Well, are there any other amendments? And I'm hoping there aren't. Seeing none, let's go now to the ordinance as amended.
Mr. Heckman?
Yes.
Mr. Lott?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Ms. Zirinsky?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mr. Dees?
Yes.
Mrs. Ferraro?
Peg? Peg, we're voting on the ordinance.
No.
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 6-1. Didn't she say no?
No, she voted.
She voted yes.
She voted
no.
yes.
Oh, I thought she said no.
She
Well,
said
oh,
no.
Peg, what did you say? This
No, she said
gets
no.
messed up here sometimes. Did you vote no?
What? I did vote no. yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We just want to be sure. Don't want to accidentally record something. All right, it passes by the vote of 6-1, as you already said. Thank you very much.
Fingers crossed, we got about another week.
We always keep our fingers crossed around here. Amongst other things. Okay, now, I have nothing on the agenda. Is there any other old business to discuss? Seeing none, we'll go to new business. And I have an introduction of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance Authorizing Preparation and Submission of a Declaration of Taking and Related Documentation for the Lands of Sublease Holdings." Was there someone who would like to sponsor this ordinance? I'll sponsor it. Is there a second? Does someone on the phone want to second this?
Yes, I'll second it, Lon.
All right, Mr. Lott seconds it. There will be a public hearing, debate, and possible vote at the November 7th, 2019 meeting. All right. Next, consideration of a calendar year 2020 court cost increase resolution. Mr. Warner, would you please introduce this one?
We did some best of it, excuse me. Okay. Now, therefore, it be resolved that any other fee schedule consistent herewith is hereby repealed insofar as the same affects the attached fee schedule, which deals with the Northampton County resolution with court order that was issued authorizing court cost increases to take effect on January 1st, 2020.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion on this? I don't know if anyone's here. Courts? I don't think so. But is there any discussion? Seeing none, call for the vote.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Lott?
Yes.
Ms. Zirinsky?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mr. Dees?
Yes.
Mrs. Ferraro?
Yes.
And Mr. Heckman?
Oh.
Mr.
Yes, yes.
Adopted by a vote
Sounds
of
like she's
7-0.
choking. Thank you. Okay. Are you all right, Peg?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to check. All right, next on the agenda is consideration of a resolution accepting a monetary donation from Friends of Graysdale. Mr. Werner?
Yes. The Friends of Graysdale Foundation mission statement is to develop a Graysdale community involvement through fundraising efforts that promote and finance innovative programs that will supplement and enhance quality of life and provide Graysdale residents extended care opportunities. Now therefore it be resolved by the Northampton County Council that it does hereby authorize the county executive to accept on behalf of the Graysdale Friends of Graysdale Foundation the donation of $2,000 to be used by the volunteer offices of Graysdale for holiday gifts for the residents.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? We've done this.
Just, I'll be voting support, but I just want to say congratulations on all the things that the foundation is doing over there.
I'll pass that on. Thank you.
No, very good. All right, call for the vote.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Ms. Zirinsky?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mr. Dees?
Yes.
Mrs. Ferraro?
Yes.
Mr. Heckman?
Yes.
Mr. Lott?
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to go to consideration of a general purpose authority, Lehigh Valley Health Network Project Resolution. This was discussed yesterday at a committee meeting. Would someone introduce this? Be willing to introduce it? Ms. Zirinsky will introduce it. Would you read? Yeah.
Got it. Now therefore be it resolved by the Northampton County Council as follows. The above clauses are incorporated herein and made a part hereof by this reference. It is hereby determined and declared pursuant to the act that it is desirable for the health, safety, and welfare of the people in the area served by the borrowers for the authority to undertake the financing of the project through the issuance of the bonds in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $650 million. The declaration made with respect to the project extends to refunding bonds with respect to the project and any additional bonds necessary to complete the project, which may be issued by the authority, provided, however, that such declaration shall not be deemed to authorize changes increasing the scope of the project. The approval of this project shall not obligate the taxing authority of this county or its funds in any way. The property officers and other personnel of Northampton County are hereby authorized and empowered to take all such further action and execute additional documents as they may deem appropriate to carry out the purpose of this resolution. Any resolution or part of any resolution conflicting with the provisions of this resolution is hereby repealed insofar as the same affects this resolution. This resolution shall take immediately.
Okay, thank you. This was discussed a fair amount yesterday at the committee meeting. I don't know if there's any more discussion or questions on it. It's a joint venture. All right, seeing none, call for the vote.
Ms. Zirinsky.
Yes.
Mr. Warner.
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic.
Yes.
Mr. Deeds.
Yes.
Mrs. Ferraro.
Yes.
Mr. Heckman.
Yes.
Mr. Lott.
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 7-0.
All right, thank you. Next, I have consideration of Article 13 contracts. We have the Wind Gap Electric, Electrical Construction, and Bean Incorporated Contractors, General Construction, B Corporate Environments, and Wind Gap Electric, Electrical Construction, and Bean Incorporated Contractors, General Construction. Mr. Werner?
Yes,
Please.
thank you, Mr. President. For Wind Gap Electric, now therefore it be resolved that the Northampton County Council does hereby concur with the recommendations of the county executive as set forth in the attached documentation to approve a contract with Wind Gap Electric and Bean Incorporated Contractors. So moved.
Thank you. Are there any discussions on this?
Just
Mr.
a
Kusick,
comment.
go ahead.
It's disappointing that we wound up with failed bids and had to negotiate this afterwards. So I would hope that we have more competitive bidding in the future, because that's how we get the best price. And if we only have one bid, how do we really know we're getting the best price? And Wind Gap has been here a lot. I trust those guys. They've done us well. But I just hope that in the future we do a better job of bidding these out so we do have some competition.
All right, any other discussion? Seeing none, could we please call for the vote?
Mr. Warner.
Yes.
Ms. Zirinsky.
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic.
Yes.
Mr. Deeds.
Yes.
Mrs. Ferraro.
Yes.
Mr. Heckman.
Yes.
Mr. Lott.
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 7-0.
All right, the next resolution we have is corporate environments. And this is for Mr. Werner, and it involves the Forensic Center and the Corrections Office.
Yes,
if you
it
would.
does, and it also involves an artifact that we know is called a desk that Mr. Lossig owns, so we're going to make sure we get involved in that. Now therefore it be resolved that the Northampton County Council does hereby concur with the recommendations of the county executive as set forth in the attached document to approve a contract with Corporate Environments for furniture for the new Forensic Center Upper Nazareth Township, and the price is $95,983.25. So moved. We did discuss it. So.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, call for the vote.
Mr. Warner.
Yes.
Ms. Zirinsky.
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic.
Yes.
Mr. Deeds.
Yes.
Mrs. Ferraro.
Yes.
Mr. Heckman.
Yes.
And Mr. Lott.
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. That's all I have. Is there any other new business to discuss? Anybody have anything? All right. Let's go to council committee reports. Ms.
We
Zirinsky.
had a committee meeting today. We went over the Liberty to Gap proposal for the MOU, as well as a bi-county agreement between Monroe and Northampton. We also discussed the Penny's Pipeline and the December 2nd hemp symposium that's going to take place at Northampton Community College from 6 to 8 p.m.
Thank you. Any other committee reports? Anyone want to say anything about? Seeing nothing. We'll go to liaison reports. Council liaison reports. Seeing none, we'll go to council clerk's report.
Nothing.
Nothing. We'll go to the council solicitor's report. Nothing. Anxiously awaiting. Nothing. And I just want to make an announcement that Councilwoman Lori Vargo Hefner's father passed away yesterday. And that's one reason she's not here today. And hopefully we all can, in our own way, remember her and her family. I believe there's going to be a service next Friday. So I want to pass that on to council and administration. All right, if that's it, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Mr. Dietz?
Second.
Second. Mr. Kusick, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned.
Oh, good thing we got that.
Okay, you have to come with me to sign this document.
Yeah.